So 2025 was an amazing year for movies, wasn't it? We've had some great American films, some great foreign films, great animated films, and of course some great Japanese anime films. If you missed my video from last week, I went over my favorite anime shows of 2025, mostly the TV shows. Today we may talk about a few of my favorite anime films of the year, and so today we'll be counting down my top 15 favorite movies of the year. That's right, 15, because 10 was not enough. In fact, as of the time I'm writing this script, there are still a handful of films I'm trying to watch before I finish making this video, and probably a few more I won't be able to get to until after I upload this video. If you want to see my full list of films from 2025 that I watched, ranked, that'll be available on my Letterboxd, link in the description. But without further ado, let's jump into my number 15. At number 15 is Sentimental Value, directed by, this is a Norwegian film, so excuse my pronunciation, Joachim Trier. It stars Renate Reinsve as a stage actress named Nora, who is reunited with her estranged father, a famed film director played by Stellan Skarsgård. He asks Nora to play the lead role in an upcoming film he's developing, but when she refuses, he instead hires a popular American actress played by Elle Fanning. This movie snuck up on me. There is a lot of layers and subtleties to the relationships and histories of these characters. I feel like they've been stuck in my mind ever since I saw it weeks ago. And the movie constantly avoids convention up until the very end. For example, you'd think that Elle Fanning's character would be a somewhat vapid caricature just to be the film's antagonist, but her character is very self-aware and surprisingly humble, and actually has one of the most moving scenes in the entire film for me. At number 14 is Begonia, directed by Yorgos Lanthimos. Jesse Plemons stars as a conspiracy-obsessed man who enlists his brother to help him kidnap and interrogate a powerful CEO played by Emma Stone, who he believes is an alien. This is a very entertaining movie, and honestly one of my favorites of Yorgos Lanthimos' filmography. There's a certain charm to dialogue films like 12 Angry Men, which pit characters with opposing viewpoints against each other. I think there's just something fascinating about seeing the real-time process of a person changing their minds or relenting, like a buildup of tension that eventually gets released. That's exactly what this movie is. Jesse Plemons believes Emma Stone is an alien. Emma Stone knows she is not. Can she convince him that he's wrong, or will she be coerced into a false confession? And because she isn't an alien, what happens when she can't do things he asks her to do? How will she get out of the situation? I don't want to spoil anything, but the movie goes in some insane directions, and it actually doesn't keep you on Emma Stone's side the entire time. At number 13 is Cloud, directed by Kiyoshi Kurosawa. Masaki Suda stars as a lowly scalper who gradually earns the grudges of the people he's ripped off. Suddenly, his cushy yet unstable life finally comes crumbling down. One of a few different movies this year about how greed and capitalism corrupts our values and turns desperate people into heartless machines that continue to do things they know harm either themselves or other people. It's not Kiyoshi Kurosawa's best movie, but a really solid slow burn thriller from the director of the masterpiece slow burn Japanese horror films Cure and Pulse. The story takes several turns I was not expecting, and the haunting ending sealed the deal for me. Even a weaker Kiyoshi Kurosawa film is one of the best of the year. At number 12 is The Phoenician Scheme, directed by Wes Anderson. Benicio del Toro plays a wealthy businessman who appoints his only daughter, a nun, as sole heir to his estate after surviving his latest assassination attempt. Since the Grand Budapest Hotel, Wes Anderson has spent the last decade polishing his already precise visual language while experimenting with different ways to tell his stories, dipping his toes into foreign languages, anthology films, short films, and metatextual surrealism. With The Phoenician Scheme, Wes Anderson returns to basics with a feature-length linear story, and as a result, I think it's his most consistently enjoyable and accessible film since the Grand Budapest Hotel. Is it as good? No, but it's not trying to be. Even compared to Grand Budapest, this is a pretty simple, small-scale film about an emotionally detached father trying to connect with his emotionally detached daughter. Also, Michael Cera is here. I know people get tired of Wes Anderson's shtick and say he makes the same movies every time, but I feel like when paired with a story and characters as fun and engaging as this, at least for me, it's hard not to be charmed again by his brand. At number 11 is Kokuho, directed by Lee Sang-il. Ryo Yoshizawa stars as the son of a yakuza who is brought into the world of kabuki theater as an onnagata apprentice for the famed Tambaya Kabuki family, where he forms a lifelong friendship, partnership, and rivalry with their son, as they both aim for the top of the kabuki world. There's a reason this became the highest grossing live-action Japanese film of all time in Japan, breaking a 22-year-old record. This is an epic, sweeping, beautiful, and heart-wrenching drama about one of Japan's oldest performance arts and the artists behind it. And it's captured on film in a way that it likely never has before. One of cinema's advantages over live theater is its ability to show close-ups, and this film uses close-ups so well. You can literally see the texture of the kabuki actors' makeup and the intricacies of their facial expressions, movements, and their blood, sweat, and tears. Sometimes literally. It's incredibly immersive, and together with the film's orchestral score, it fully brings out the beauty, grandeur, and emotionality of the kabuki performances, as well as the tumultuous lives of the characters outside of their performances. This film does feel maybe a little too long at just under 3 hours, but it makes the most of that time to tell a story that almost feels like a biopic, with a grand scale about dreams, sacrifice, hard work, hardship, scandal, family ties, and artistry over the course of one artist's entire life. At number 10 is The Colors Within, or Kimi no Iro, directed by Naoko Yamada. Sayu Suzukawa stars as Totsuko, a student at a Catholic boarding school who sees people's personalities as colors. When she meets Kimi, who has some of the most beautiful colors she's ever seen, and Rui, a local music enthusiast, she asks them to form a band with her, despite the fact that she doesn't play an instrument. I, of course, love director Naoko Yamada and what her era at Kyoto Animation brought to the studio and to the anime industry at large. She's made a name for herself directing films and TV series about adolescence, and her projects have helped to define the modern style of cute girls doing cute things anime. Her directorial debut, Caton, was a show that kickstarted the girl band anime craze that continues to this day. Her last project was quite different though. The Heike story was a historical epic, but still told with her unwavering sensitivity and yes, sometimes her eye for cuteness. The Colors Within is a return to the genre that originally brought her to the spotlight. Girls and a boy in a band. But now that the genre is saturated, how does she differentiate this film from shows like Bocchi the Rock, Bang Dream, and Girls Band Cry? Well, for one thing, The Colors Within is honestly, I think, her most beautiful looking film to date. The animation, cinematography, and color design are wonderfully rendered, and the character designs even ditch the big Bambi eyes of her previous moe projects for a more proportionally realistic and detailed but still very cute style. The story setting is also super unique. I didn't even know Catholic girls' boarding schools were a thing in Japan. Apart from that, the story takes a much more relaxed, perhaps thinner approach than most girl band anime do nowadays that strive for ultra comedy or ultra drama. Being honest, it's not Yamada's most riveting project on a script level, but it does remind me of the similarly laid-back approach that defined K-On!, and even more so, the film that likely inspired it all, the live-action girl band film from 2005, Linda Linda Linda. Check that film out if you haven't. Anyway, The Colors Within is content being a more grounded, patient story about growing up and defying the expectations of your authority figures, and it has some of the most gorgeous 2D animation you'll ever see. Sure, it's light on plots, but so are some of the best films ever made. If it hasn't found its audience now, I feel like this is the kind of film that will develop a cult following and be seen as a classic of the slice of life anime and film genre over time. My number 9 is Materialists, directed by Celine Song. Dakota Johnson plays a New York City matchmaker who believes love is the last thing necessary to find your ideal partner, until she finds herself having to pick between two men, a wealthy, charming finance bro played by Pedro Pascal, or her struggling actor ex whom she may still have feelings for, played by Chris Evans. I'll be honest, this movie blew me away the first time I watched it, particularly the ending. It was actually my number 1 movie of the year for a while, which might surprise you since this movie has somewhat mediocre reviews. On a second viewing, admittedly it didn't do as much for me, which is why it's at number 9, but I still love it enough for it to make my top 10. The thing is, I know and understand the issues that people have with this movie. It was marketed as a romantic comedy, and the premise certainly sounds like one, but it's more of a drama. The whole movie is just people talking explicitly about their thoughts and feelings and the literal message of the movie for the entire movie. The movie is extremely predictable. The characters are flat tropes. I get it. And even though I know Dakota Johnson's character is intended to be someone who is detached from her feelings, I get that people feel her performance is lacking. By all logic, this movie shouldn't work very well at all. Yet, for me, It absolutely does. Despite all its obvious flaws, I still connect to this movie, which also happens to be the whole message of the movie. For our rational brains, it's easy to get caught up in the details and lose sight of the forest for the trees. And for our modern capitalism-rotted brains, we can't help but see everything as transactional or as good or bad deals. Even romance. This movie is a reminder of what's really important and how you can feel love for someone or something without there needing to be a rational explanation why. And what's important about this movie is that Chris Evans absolutely carries, and his last few scenes make me cry. At number 8 is Frankenstein, directed by Guillermo del Toro. Oscar Isaac stars as Victor Frankenstein, and Jacob Elordi plays the creature, and yep, this is Frankenstein. There have been countless adaptations of Mary Shelley's classic sci-fi horror novel, but what I love about this one is how personal it feels. Obviously, this was a lifelong dream project for Guillermo del Toro, and it comes through in how he treats both of the main characters. We explore Victor Frankenstein's past and the trauma that resulted in his adulthood psychosis, but I also love how this movie sets up the state of the medical and science community at the time, how there was excitement over their current understandings and recent discoveries about human biology, and how there was still much unknown about the boundary between life and death. In this kind of environment, Victor comes off less as a crazy, mad scientist, which I've kind of always thought of him as in pop culture, and more as just an ambitious, albeit arrogant, researcher who's after the next big breakthrough in medical science. On the other hand, I also really appreciate what Del Toro does with the creature. I won't say what it is because it was honestly a big surprise to me as someone who hasn't read the original novel, but I can say for sure it gives the creature so many extra dimensions as a character that weren't there in the classic Universal Frankenstein film from the 1930s, which to be honest is the only other adaptation I've seen. I don't know if it's necessarily one of Guillermo del Toro's best films, but it ended up being one of my favorite films from him, and I'm kicking myself for not making more of an effort to try and see it while it was briefly in theaters. At number 7 is Resurrection, a Chinese film directed by Bi Gan. Alright, buckle up for this plot synopsis. Jackson Yi stars as a Deliriant, a former human creature with the ability to dream, in a future where most of humanity has given up dreaming in exchange for immortality. Miss Shu, played by Shu Qi, tracks him down, and at his deathbed, she installs into his heart a film reel and witnesses his cinematic dreams told as 4 short stories spanning China's 20th century, wherein he lives 4 different lives. So, yeah, this film is wild and probably the most artsy-fartsy film I saw in 2025. And those don't always do it for me, but I really loved Resurrection. On a purely visual level, this might be one of the most interesting to look at movies of the decade, let alone of the year. The first 20 or so minutes, for example, are filmed in the style of 1920s German expressionist silent films like The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari and Nosferatu, complete with cardboard props, intertitles, and that crunchy 1920s frame rate. And then each of the 4 short stories showcase the evolution of cinematic techniques and language over the course of the 20th century, while also taking place at different points across the 20th century, culminating in the 4th story taking place on New Year's Eve 1999, and being done in a single 30-minute take. And as impressive as that sounds, it's mind-blowing to see it happen in real time on the big screen. In terms of the stories, I'll say although I was admittedly a bit lost and sleepy in the first half of the film, each short story is better than the last, and the movie ends on one of the best cinematic highs I've experienced this year, thanks in part to that mind-blowing long take. Resurrection is about dreams. It compares movies to dreams, and it itself feels like a dream. In a time when corporations are getting greedier and our cinematic institutions are as a result getting weaker, this film is an encapsulation of that anxiety that we movie fans are currently experiencing, and it feels especially prescient and forward-thinking. Movies are dreams, and like the Deliriants in this movie, I'd rather die than never dream again. Also, this movie proves that fart jokes can be cinema, and man, I wish I had an out-of-context clip to show you guys. At number 6 is K-pop Demon Hunters, directed by Maggie Kong and Chris Applehands. Arden Cho and EJ star as the voices of Rumi, the leader of Huntrix, a K-pop girl group made up of her, Zoe, and Mira, and who secretly come from a line of singers who use their voices to protect the world against demons. But life isn't so simple for Rumi, who has a secret she can't tell anyone, even her fellow hunters. I'm sure you've heard enough about this movie from everyone on the internet and all the kids in your life, and master filmmaker Park Chan-wook, and master film enjoyer Hideo Kojima. This movie kicks ass. It's a great story with a very emotionally resonant character arc with Rumi. It's an incredible K-pop fueled original musical that utilizes the entire range of diegesis. More on that in this video. And it's the latest showcase of Sony Pictures Animation's mastery of creating expressive and stylish modern 3D animation. Remember when they were known as the studio that made the Emoji Movie? The only issue I have with K-pop Demon Hunters is I feel the ending is a little rushed, and at the very least needed one more scene of the three girls talking it out after everything they went through. Other than that, I think it's basically perfect for what it is. Also, I think I have K-pop Demon Hunters to blame for turning me into a once. At number 5 is actually another mythical music-themed movie, Sinners, directed by Ryan Coogler. Michael B. Jordan stars as twins Smoke and Stack in the Jim Crow South, who decide to open up a neighborhood juke bar for their local community. There is just one problem. Vampires. Alright, this one's on literally everyone's top 10 list for 2025. Like everyone else has already said, this is a fantastic movie, and even though at the end of the day it's a horror thriller action film with vampires, I love that this movie spends almost half of its length building up to that with dialogue driven slice of life scenes, taking its time to introduce all the characters first. Every line in this film, particularly in that first half, is so rich and layered, hinting at the deep histories and relationships between the characters. And although this film is led mostly by an incredible black ensemble cast, I do want to highlight the Chinese characters in the movie who feel equally as realized. I gotta be honest, I had no idea there was a Chinese American population in the South during this time, and whose descendants continue living there today. Sidebar, but if you want to learn more, I'd recommend checking out this documentary on YouTube. Ryan Coogler actually worked with the director of this doc on Sinners to help create the Chow family in his film. And although the musical performance scene I Lied to You featuring Miles Caton is of course my favorite moment in the movie and maybe is the movie scene of the year, my second favorite moment in Sinners belongs to Grace Chow, played by Lee Jun-lee, in a scene that was extremely polarizing and created a lot of discourse last year, but that made me go fuck yeah. Hashtag justice for Grace Chow. At number 4 is Marty Supreme, directed by Josh Safdie. Timothee Chalamet stars as a proud young table tennis player in the 1950s who will stop at nothing, and I do mean nothing, to prove he's the world's greatest at a sport on the cusp of international fervor. Josh Safdie and his brother have made a name for themselves making exciting movies about arrogant dudes who think they're invincible yet dig themselves into deeper and deeper holes, desperately trying to achieve their goals. If you haven't seen Robert Pattinson in Good Time or Adam Sandler in Uncut Gems, and you're not afraid of a movie that is a literal anxiety attack, definitely check those out. With Marty Supreme though, Josh Safdie essentially makes the same kind of movie again, but elevated to a global scale and with a period setting. It feels more epic, more immersive, more funny, and somehow way more stressful than any of their movies before this. And despite its 2.5-hour runtime, it's also a thrillingly fast-paced film from start to finish that feels half its length, almost to a fault, because it honestly does feel like it has a few missing deleted scenes. I also love this film's score. The anachronistic blend of 1950s imagery with the 80s synth sounds and power ballads amplifies the movie's unrelenting energy. One other interesting thing about this movie is the cast. Obviously, Timothée Chalamet is great, but the rest of the cast is too, and if you look into them, most of them are either first-time actors, people from completely different occupations like Tyler the Creator and Kevin O'Leary, or people like Gwyneth Paltrow who hasn't acted in a film, or at least a non-MCU film, in over a decade. And they're all perfectly cast. Last thing I'll say is that Marty spends a good chunk of this movie desperate to go to Japan, and I too would willingly get spanked for that. At number 3 is No Other Choice, directed by Park Chan-wook. Byung-hun stars as a paper industry expert and family man who's abruptly laid off from his job and finds himself unable to get a new one. Desperate, he decides he has no other choice but to eliminate his competition. I don't think I've ever seen a movie with a multi-word title use its title and dialogue as many times as this movie does. Completely random observation, but yeah. Anyway, Park Chan-wook is at full power with this movie, somehow making simple Film 101 camera tricks and transitions like cross dissolves, overlays, match cuts, and crash zooms feel like things we've never seen done before. Seriously, there's one particular transition in the movie that was so mind-blowingly cool, my jaw dropped to the floor when I saw it. His mastery of the craft of filmmaking on a pure technical level is beyond what almost every other director in the world is doing. Plus, No Other Choice also happens to be a damn entertaining movie to boot, mixing thrills, suspense, and hilarious black comedy elements together with the obviously very timely commentary about the dire state of the worldwide job market and how evil corporations can affect the lives of their workers and drive people to desperation. Byung-hun is incredible in this film, and so is Ye-jin, who plays his wife. And the movie is just totally unpredictable. Not a single scene in the movie went in the direction I was expecting it to, and I had such a good time watching something that felt totally original and unique. At number 2 is Chainsaw Man the Movie Ryusei Arc, directed by Tatsuya Yoshihara. Kikunosuke Toya and Reina Ueda star as Denji and Ryusei, two teenagers who fall in love in a bleak world overrun by monsters known as devils who feed off human fear. Soon, Denji, whose alter ego is Chainsaw Man, must face off against his most powerful foe yet, the Bomb Devil. I made a whole 20+ minute video review of this one already, so I'll try to keep my thoughts here brief. I've always loved the Ryusei arc from the moment I read it in the original manga because of how cinematic it always felt, and because of the way the author Tatsuki Fujimoto expertly takes readers on a full emotional journey in an arc that plays out in 3 acts like a film. It was always meant to be a self-contained experience, and this film adaptation is a more perfect realization of that intent than I ever could have hoped for. Elevated from every direction by what has to be one of the best theatrical anime productions of the 21st century. It's clear from frame 1 that Yoshihara and the entire team knew and loved the source material so much and wanted to do everything in their power to elevate it to its maximum potential in a true big screen experience. It's filled to the brim with a stylistically diverse range of explosive action spectacle, bombastic comedy, and of course, genuinely poignant, fleeting romance and heartbreaking tragedy. This is a goddamn sad movie. And, well, if you've seen the previous Tatsuki Fujimoto film adaptation Look Back, that shouldn't come as a surprise to you. It's a sad movie, but also insanely fun and easy to watch. I literally saw it 5 times in theaters, which is now my record for the most I've ever watched any single movie in theaters. It's the best anime film of the year by far, and my favorite animated film of the year. And to be honest, if you caught me on a different day, I might even say it was my number 1 favorite film of 2025, period. But see, unfortunately, Chainsaw Man Ryusei Arc had one thing working against it. I already read the source material. I already knew every beat of the story, and unless they decided to go crazy and do an anime original ending or something, there was always an upper limit as to how much it could surprise me. I love Chainsaw Man the Movie Ryusei Arc, but today, I'm feeling just a little bit more passionate about an original film that truly surprised me. At number 1 is One Battle, I'm just kidding. At number 1 is Rental Family, directed by Hikari. Brendan Fraser plays an American actor living in Tokyo who is scouted by a rental people agency to be their token white guy for hire. One of his first jobs is to pose as a young girl's absentee father. I bet this is not the movie you thought I was going to put here. This is not the movie I thought I would put here, but this movie really genuinely surprised me. And I think it surprised the entire audience I watched it with, yet I don't really see this film on anybody's best of year lists. And Searchlight Pictures, the distribution company, didn't really market this movie or campaign it for awards at all, so maybe they didn't even have much confidence in it. Maybe it's because it's a sweet, wholesome film, and right now everyone's getting kind of cynical, and we're all seeking out media with some sort of edge, me included. Just look at my list so far. But sometimes it's nice to have a movie that just feels like a warm hug. And if that kind of movie sounds like your thing, this is definitely worth checking out. Even if it's not necessarily your thing, I would still recommend it. To be honest, I went in expecting a pleasant, if kind of unremarkable movie, but what I got was a film that was genuinely laugh-out-loud funny, full of surprises, and actually quite tear-jerking. The audience I saw it with, including me, was fully locked in, laughing, gasping, and going totally silent at all the right moments. It has the heart of a Hirokazu Koreeda film mixed with the humor of a crowd-pleasing studio comedy. It also explores the pros and cons of the rental people industry in Japan and how it can help or harm different kinds of people in different ways. I also want to mention it avoids most of the cliches and pitfalls of the, white dude in a non-white country trope we often see in films. And the Japanese cast in this film are never overshadowed by Brendan Fraser. Shoutouts to Takehiro Hira, Mari Yamamoto, Shannon Mahina Gorman, and Akira Emoto in particular. This movie may wear its heart on its sleeve, but that doesn't get in the way of it being a complete package of a film experience for me, and one that I can see myself coming back to and loving more and more in the years to come. Before I end the video, I want to shout out some honorable mentions. First up, Wake Up Dead Man, the latest entry into Rian Johnson's Knives Out murder mystery series. It's just as entertaining as the previous entries in my opinion, but for different reasons. Truth be told, this was actually part of the top 15 up until the last minute. I had it scripted, recorded, and partially edited that part of the video, but I decided to bump it down to the honorable mentions section after I saw Kokuho yesterday. Nonetheless, it was one of my favorites of the year, and if you like the previous Knives Out films, don't miss this one. One battle after another. I've seen this movie at number 1 on a lot of people's lists, and it will probably be the Oscar Best Picture winner. I didn't connect with it much personally, to be honest, but I did find it pretty enjoyable, and hey, maybe you'll love it as much as everyone else does. Next, Cocoon, Aru Natsu no Shoujo Tachi Yori, or Cocoon, from the girls of that summer. A little-known World War II story told in a way that could only be done in animation. I actually talked about this a bit in my 2025 anime video from last week. Left-Handed Girl, a slice-of-life drama about a fractured family operating a noodle stand in a Taipei night market. At times sweet and at other times upsetting, I found it a little bit aimless, but it's an engaging and honest portrait of complex family dynamics and an accurate portrayal of what it feels like to be a little kid in a confusing, adult-driven world. It was just an accident. This won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival. It's a revenge story with a very reluctant and indecisive group of revengers. Very entertaining and poignant with a haunting ending. And with that, I've gone on long enough. 2025 was a fantastic year for film, like I said at the top of the video. Makima says she only enjoys 1 in 10 movies she watches, but I wonder what she would have thought of this year, and if any of these films would have changed her life. Anyway, tell me what your favorite films of 2025 were in the comments below. If you haven't seen my best anime of 2025 video from last week, you can check it out right here. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, like, and share the video if you get a chance. Support the channel here, and as always, have an awesome day.